want to start today with a quiz for review. I graded your quizzes and I wanted to explain what I was expecting and what you gave me and stuff. So, this is the prompt. This is the prompt that was on the assignment page. And number one, identify the image by subject matter, size and date and place of creation. Describe the elements of the iconography and what they represent. Support your answer with information gathered from internet and textbook. And number three, as usual, list your sources as endnotes. And so this is the slide. This is how it's listed in the textbook, Christ blessing. And some of you guys gave some of the other names that have been assigned to this image, like Pantocrator and a few others, and that was all good. You found that through research, and it's from the monastery of Saint Catherine, 6th century Egypt. That part, not so bad. Okay, describe the elements of the iconography and what they represent. Support your answer with information gathered from the internet and textbook. And so this whole thing is an icon, but it has elements. And a few of you gave me a description of what icons are and how some cultures in the Christian, Judaic, Islamic history have more or less rejected iconography, saying that it was a violation of the second commandment. But that's not what I'm asking you guys. I'm asking you about the elements of this icon. And so here are some, these are the most ones that were listed: halo, Bible, gesture, robe, and some of you guys didn't get that so much, and part of it's because after 1600 years or so, the pigment has faded, but this was, and still is if you look carefully, purple. I'll talk about that in a minute. The eyes and the face, the asymmetry of the face and the beard. And so those were the kinds of things I was expecting you to find. Some of you got all of those. I was satisfied if you got at least 4 of them. And so that part was good. Halo, a surprising number of people did not mention the halo. And so what I wanted to say about that, just as a kind of a tip for you in the future, do not, if you guys can see me, you're going to think this is kind of cool, I think. My dog mask. Just saying, don't neglect the obvious. Just because it's obvious, still put it in there. And so this is a halo, and some of you said, well, it was a halo, and that made him, signified him as a holy person. That's true. But if you look carefully, and hopefully you found some of this in your research, you'll see that it is supposed to have the cross behind it. And you can see remnants of that, which is a different halo than others would wear or have depicted. This is the special halo for Jesus himself. This book, the Bible, this is an icon. It's a book and it's got a cross on it and it represents a Bible. And that is really an important part of this icon because I told you guys about the councils of Nicaea set up by Constantine in Turkey. And all of these religious scholars and bishops and people, authority in the church got together and they would decide what would be in the Bible and what it meant to be a Christian. And they would take the books that were found all over the place and decide whether or not they should be in the Bible. There are gospels according to the gospel according to St. Thomas, not in the Bible. There's also, I've heard, the gospel according to Mary Magdalene, not in the Bible. Likewise, not every book from the Judaic tradition is in the Bible either.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the purpose of the gospel?
The gospel is what they decided is the story of Jesus's life as told by 4 of his disciples, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they are pretty much the basis of the New Testament. Now, there are other books, there's Romans, there's Acts, there's a number of other books, but the Gospels are really what they call the red letter part of the Bible. Jesus's life and his words as told by 4 people who were his disciples.
Oh, so the 4 disciples is telling life about Jesus, or was they there with Jesus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so the other part of this icon is the gesture, which is a sign of authority, a sign of, should I say, blessing, a sign of pardon. It's a sign of authority. And some of you guys had talked about how these hand symbols represent Greek letters. And that's a kind of that's digging into the weeds pretty deeply. But there are scholars out there who are trying to analyze this. The robe, like I said, was supposed to be purple. Purple, the symbol of royalty. It is the color of royalty. And so Jesus, although he was poor during his lifetime, he is considered in the Christian church to be a king. And so he's been called the Prince of Peace, all kinds of names associated with royalty. And so that's what the purple robe is about. The eyes, some of you guys wrote about this, and it's kind of hard to pull apart 5 and 6, but the eyes are different from one to the other. And one eye is this side here, which is your left, his right. And this is the hand where he's blessing. And on this side of the face, his eyes are a little bit more soft and more sympathetic. On the other side, you take that Jesus, and he is more stern because he has in his book, the Bible, all of the laws of God. And you'll hear a lot about that, especially in Islamic culture, the laws of God, the laws as handed down from God. And that runs through Judaic, Christian, Islamic traditions. And so that is the difference. Now, the beard, some of you talked about this, the beard as wisdom, the beard as, this is kind of the standard iconography for age and wisdom. But his face still appears to be young. We want to give him wisdom, but not make him old. The asymmetry of the face, the beard, the eyes, something that no one said, and that's okay, is that his eyes are pretty wide open. And that doesn't, that's not only a Christian device, icon. If you go all the way back to Mesopotamia and you go back to the Assyrians and you see these statues from early Mesopotamian culture, some of the statues, some of the statuettes, the figures have big eyes. And big eyes is a way to represent someone who can see more than ordinary people. And so that is kind of what plays in here. But this is what I was looking for, and I graded them and marked them down, what you guys had and stuff. They were mostly pretty good. And so the couple that weren't were describing iconography, but not the elements of this specific icon. And so that was just really misunderstanding the question. And so I have a bunch of good examples here, and I've highlighted the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Christ is seen dressed in a purple robe. The facial hair, the beard, that usually resembles wiseness, it should be, that usually not resembles wiseness, but indicates wisdom. But, you know, I wasn't going through it for grammar, but that was a good one. Thick gospel book, or you could call that the Bible. Gesturing a blessing, that goes with the original title of this piece. But like I say, some of you had found that it is the Pantocrator. And that is what this icon became known as, because it's not only just a one-off, this image is reproduced over and over and over again through the centuries using pretty much the same iconography. The blessing, the halo, the beard, the Bible, so on. His eyes are asymmetrically sized. It's not, you know, but anyway. And his hair is asymmetrically placed. Asymmetry in painting is purposeful in order to show the two sides or the duality of Christ. And that is, again, this number 6, the asymmetry, the beard. And so bottom line, finish it off, there is a glow or a halo. So this one got it all. And so not all of them got everyone. I mean, there were a few like this that got 6 or more. But a purple color in the robe, the left hand making a sign of a blessing. It's a gospel, asymmetrical, Christ's dual nature. Good. And so his left hand is raised, make a sign of a blessing, a codex of the 4 gospels. Who knows what a codex is?
Oh my.
Like a real fancy watch? Wait, no, that's a Rolex. A codex. Somebody, one of you guys wrote this now. This is from this class.
Is it like a I don't want to say like a group or like a it is something like a group, but it's like it's not a group, it's more like a um I forgot. I don't know how to
Monty,
explain it.
you're on the right track. Basically, it is a book. And a
Right.
book is a group of chapters. It's a group of ideas. And so, yeah, it's a codex. It's a fancy name and an old name for a book. Halo behind his head. The face is separated, 2 separated people. Left looks young and spiritual, the other looks mature and powerful. And so that's that duality, God and man, the forgiving, the one who administers God's law. And so, let's see, portrays his role of both judge and savior. And so, yeah, this is what we're talking about. Obey the law. That's what a judge does, right? You go to court, you tell your story to the judge, and the judge decides whether or not you broke the law. The color purple symbolizes power and royalty. Christ's beard is painted in such a way that he appears older and wise rather than youthful. Christ with a golden cruciform halo also holds a Bible, and it has it again, a gesture of blessing. And so, is there any more? Oh, yeah. This one. This doesn't have all of them either, but this was, I thought, had made some points that I'd like to share with you. The beard, wisdom, the book, the gospel, color purple, royalty, important, gesture in a painting. And this one then took a turn to a personal account. I had seen it in my whole life. I grew up in a Catholic church, and the priest gives a final blessing that is accompanied by the congregation doing the sign of the cross, at which the end of the church, he blesses us. And see, at a Catholic church, that is where all of this comes from. It goes right back. If you want to trace the history, it's right through this. And so icons are a big part of the Catholic Church, and they were scattered throughout my Catholic high school as well. Icons are paintings that depict a holy figure like Mary, Jesus, or the saints. During the 6th century, when they surfaced, they became a huge part of the Eastern Catholic Church. Well, that is kind of true and kind of not. Just saying. The Eastern and the Western Church broke apart. They were one church until 1054, and it's called the Great Schism of 1054, when one part of it became the Roman Catholic Church, and the other half, which was really grew out of the Byzantine tradition, as it says here, um, became the Eastern Orthodox, or sometimes called the Greek Orthodox Church. And large halo, purple robe, sign of a blessing, the gospel, asymmetry. So that is that. Any questions about the quiz?
Kinda. Why did the church split up?
Why did the church what?
Split up, like the Eastern and the Western had like one church and they split up.
Oh, right. Well, it was in essence kind of something that was building up for a long time, and I don't know that there's a simple answer to that, but it had everything to do with power and authority and differences of how Christianity should be practiced.
Um,
And so, but that's, excuse me, only the first of many breakaways. In the 16th century, we have Protestantism, which is what from the Roman Catholic Church, a group of people decided that they wanted to change. They didn't like what was going on in Rome. And Martin Luther, the guy for whom Lutheran churches are named, he broke away, broke from the Pope, broke from Catholicism, and we had the Protestant Reformation. If you take a look at the word, you'll see the Protestant, first part of that word is protest. And that's not a simple thing to explain either, but basically when these things happen, it's usually that a number of people, a large group of people think that the church is going in the wrong direction. Maybe it's too liberal, maybe it's too harsh. And like with Martin Luther, a lot of people didn't trust the Pope's authority. They wanted a church without a Pope. So, you know. Well, second thing I want to talk to you about is the group presentations, because I've been getting some questions about this, and they centered around these two words, formal analysis and power structure. And this is a page right from that prompt that's on the assignments page. And D and E, power and belief system. Everybody else, I mean, so far there hasn't been any questions about the time and the place and the purpose of the work. Power and belief system presented some issues. And so I went to the power and belief system. Now, I'll tell you what I mean by that. All of this artwork that we see, that we'll see in the book, reflects in some ways where the power of that culture lies. And so I put government down there, but the government could be an emperor, a king, a pharaoh, a pope, etc. And typically there is a prevailing philosophy. For example, what we just talked about, a Byzantine icon of Jesus Christ. And the church authorities said, these are the things that need to be represented if you're going to do a picture of Jesus. He's got to have the crown, the halo with the cross. He's about to be giving blessings, got to have an asymmetrical face, got to wear a purple robe. And all of these things were decided by a bunch of people. And they wanted to make sure that they kind of walked a fine line between Christ the human and Christ the God, Christ the forgiver and Christ the judge. So that's how these things develop, and that's really what they're all about. And so that's why I gave you guys that question for quiz 4. And I typed in the wrong thing. I have Pantheon. That should be Parthenon here. But here are some examples. A Parthenon, and it is technically a temple to the Greek goddess Athena, the goddess of war. And it's the goddess for whom the city of Athens is named. And so all of that is part of why it looks like it does. It's a Greek temple, and Athena was one of many gods or goddesses in Greek religion. They had what they called polytheism. They had all kinds of gods for every purpose. And so that's part of why the Parthenon looks like it does. But the architects, these guys, Iketenos and Callicrates, they were the architects, and they used this building to express all of these high ideals about mathematical perfection. And so they really tweaked the geometry, which they invented. Greeks invented geometry. They used all of the math. They used all of the ideal proportions. And they also accounted for some of the perceptual flaws that we have as human beings in our eyes. So they made the columns look straight in a sense by tilting them a little and playing with our eyes. And so anyway, that's really the prevailing philosophy, and it's about their religion too. Colosseum, Flavian's amphitheater. It was an expression of Roman authority. And so the emperor did this, and one of the things that happened in ancient Rome, in imperial Rome, if you will, is that they placed a value on entertaining people. They realized that if they kept their people fed, if they kept them entertained, you kept them happy, life would be much better. And it worked. They stayed in power for hundreds of years with no significant revolts. In fact, that's what they call the Pax Romana, the peace that was imposed by Rome. And so anyway, that's part of this. And so that's what I mean about power and belief system. Madonna and Child, same kind of thing we were talking about with Christ. And it's about Christianity and orthodoxy And so, Armani, you ask about that, about the Great Schism, how they broke apart. Well, the Roman Church wanted to actually be more, quote, liberal, and the Eastern Church was more conservative. And so what you'll see after the Great Schism is those Byzantine depictions of Christ and Madonna and all of that, they stay the same. But what you get in Rome is stuff like the Sistine Chapel ceiling, where you got, it's a very different belief system and a very different way of looking at Christianity. And so sometimes it's hybrid, religious emperors. So like Constantine, like Justinian the Great, he was a religious emperor and he pushed Christianity. He reconquered much of the former Roman Empire, and along the way, he built churches like San Vitale in Ravenna. And so that's what I mean about power and belief system. There's things behind the scenes that affect how this building, this statue, this painting, this drawing, this book looks. And so I have another part of this too. Formal analysis. People have been asking me, what is formal analysis? I put this on assignments page, but I also put it on this PowerPoint, and that is and let me see, I gotta find my screen, which is here, and share and open it up. Can you see that? J. Paul Getty Museum?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good. Thanks, Robin. And so formal analysis is really, it's the elements of art that are components of a work that can be isolated and defined. Now you got to take that differently than the symbols. All of those things that we talked about with Christ, blessing, those were all symbols. But this is actually much more basic. And I have the elements of art right there, and you can get all over the place on this website. But the elements of art: line, shape, and form, space, color, and texture. And so that's really a lot of things that you guys know. If you don't know it outright, you probably know it instinctively. Horizontal lines, a feeling of rest and stability, because that's the way things are. The weights on the bottom, the lighter areas on top, and in this case, the sky, which is about as light as you can get. Vertical lines communicate a sense of height because they're perpendicular to the earth and extending towards the sky. And it says in this church interior, vertical lines suggest spirituality rising beyond human reach towards the heavens. We're going to find this happening in a lot of stuff, and especially when we start looking at mosque and the minarets, and those are just straight up vertical, and they reach beyond human reach and towards the heavens. We'll see when we look at Gothic Christian cathedrals, they go up they reach beyond what people can reach, and it is toward the heavens. So anyway, vertical and horizontal used in diagonal. Sometimes you'll find things that are diagonal, curved lines, shape and form. And so we're talking about these as elements, but they're showing you actually images. But this is a curved line. It is the edge of the pool. But it is also a line. And this is the sinking ship and the storm and the rocks and everything. This is the vertical and a horizontal in the middle for stability. But we're talking about things, but it is composed in a way that if you just kind of take a look at the lines, it is a diagonal line. And so form, a lot of times what we talk about with form has to do with geometry, but not always. This is a sculpture of a rearing horse. And so that is an organic or a biomorphic shape. And they talk about organic shapes and forms here, as opposed to form that is essentially geometric. Three-dimensional space, what kind of color is used, etc., etc. And so this is a little tricky, but you don't really have to get into it a whole lot. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a way to get to other ideas. And so the other ideas are what I described to you: iconography, meaning, stuff like that. And so when you pick out your subject, think about how these ideas apply. It doesn't have to be a big part of it, but it'll help you explain what your subject is about. And so they have handouts and things too. And so as we go along, when more questions arise from you guys working on your presentations, we'll answer them. And so, thus begins Islamic art. And what I want to talk to you about is that we were talking about this the other day, the idea or how should I say this? The awareness that Islam comes out of the Christian religion. And in fact, if you are a Muslim, you would know that a lot of the belief system in Islam goes back to the same beliefs that the Judaic tradition embraces. And they embrace Christianity. They don't look at Jesus as the Messiah or the Savior, but they do recognize Jesus as a prophet. And the prophet Muhammad actually had quite a lot of admiration for Mary, the mother of Jesus, saying that she was a very good woman and represented herself well in God's law. And so it's kind of strange in this day and age that there's a lot of tension between Christian world, the Islamic world, and the Judaic world, and it's as old as everything. So this is the Islamic world in the year 1500. And you see, it covers much of what used to be the Roman Empire. And so it really covers a lot of these places and it coexists with Eastern Orthodox Christianity as well. And there are places like Spain where Islam took hold, and the Moors from Morocco here, they lived and they ruled Spain for centuries. And then some of the tribes from center of Europe came down, drove them out, and they came back, and it's kind of an ongoing battle. But there's still battles being waged. We have in the 10th century Europeans coming over here and trying to take over the Holy Land, Jerusalem. Those are called the Crusades. We still have tensions in the Middle East between Israel and some of her Arabic, Muslim neighbors. Just saying. A lot of conflict in the Balkan Peninsula between Christian and Islam. And so I say that because I'm going to show you a video in just a moment. But I want to tell you about this. This has got the star, it's the Dome of the Rock. It's in Jerusalem, and it is the first totally Islamic architecture. From the ground up, represents Islam. And Islamic architecture borrows heavily from those kinds of traditions that it arises out of. For instance, archways, that's a Roman thing. We have columns, that's a Greek thing. And we have this shape, you can't see it this way, but this is an octagon. And an octagon is the shape of the chapel of San Vitale in Ravenna, one of the things that Justinian built. And so it kind of has a floor plan, something like Christian architecture of the time. The dome, that's a Roman invention. But I will say this, and you got to keep this in mind. It looks different than all of those other cultures that I just mentioned. One of the things that flourishes in Islamic architecture is mosaic. And they do these elaborate mosaics, these kind of colored fired tiles, and they put them in, piece them together, and they create elaborate patterns. This is like so exquisite. And I might add that it conforms to mathematical precision. One of the things that happens at this time in the 7th, 8th, 9th centuries is that the Roman Empire has kind of gone away. Islamic culture is emerging, and in the Arabian Peninsula and in the Middle East, and then by extension into Spain, across North Africa. But in the Islamic world, learning flourishes. They do all kinds of things in this Arabic culture, in the Islamic culture. Their science moves way ahead of anything that was happening in the West at the time. Their architecture and their mathematics, algebra. You guys had to take algebra, kind of a mathematics of trying to find the unknown quantity. Algebra, that's an Arabic word because algebra was invented by the Arabic people. So there's a lot of stuff here that basically the West is kind of starting to really go downhill, but the East, the former Eastern Byzantine culture, Islam comes and it is revitalized. They don't have a downtime. Here is the inside, the interior of the Dome of the Rock. And this is, you see, this is kind of borrowed. It's a column, somewhat of a Corinthian type column, Greek, Roman archways. But this is something that they do in Islamic architecture. They do this archway, but they use different color stone. So it's not just an archway, it's a decorative archway. And so in order to pull something like this off, you have to have a great deal of mathematical precision. And again, look at the walls. And they are lavishly decorated, but not that much in the way of depictions of humans or animals, and sometimes not even flora, but those things would be acceptable inside a mosque. But bottom line is that this is patterning. This is like exquisite. And I want to point this out. This is the part of the dome here. And instead of having depictions, icons, if you will, of Mary, of Jesus, of St. John the Apostle, St. John the Baptist, Moses, Abraham, all of that, didn't have it. But they will have quotes from the Quran. And so they took that second commandment very seriously about having graven images. It's a characteristic of Islamic art and architecture. And here is the interior of the dome, and you can see those scripture quotes from the Quran around the perimeter, but this is not Jesus looking down or God the Father or anything. It's its own thing. It is exquisite, mathematically precise design. And so, I thought I had replaced, I'm thinking out loud. I thought I had a link to a short video about the Dome of the Rock, and it tells a story. I'll tell you a bit of it, but we'll watch it on Wednesday. This is the rock. This is the center point of this mosque. And the rock here is to both religions, or all three religions, Judaic, Christian, and Muslim, This is the place where God asked Abraham to kill his son. In the Christian and Judaic traditions, his son is Isaac. And God asked Abraham, if you love me, I want you to go to this rock and I want you to kill your son. And as it says in the Bible, he had taken his son here, this guy who had waited all of his life to have a son, and God wants him to kill him, and he's just about ready to put the knife right to his throat, and the angel comes. So God doesn't want you proven that you love God and you believe God, and saves Isaac. In the Muslim tradition, it's the other son that is part of this story, and that is Ishmael. But bottom line, it's a shared heritage. It's a shared belief. And so that makes Jerusalem one of the holy cities. I showed you in late antiquity. I told you about Constantine and his mother Helena went to Jerusalem, identified these sites, identified where the Holy Sepulchre, where they thought it was, and they built a church on top of the tomb where Jesus was buried. Jerusalem, holy site. The Judaic tradition, it revolves around Jerusalem as well. The Wailing Wall, the holiest place in all of Judaism, Christianity. It's not the holiest place in Islam. There are three important centers, Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. But at any rate, great significance, religious significance attached to these. And so what happens? We start to see mosques as we know them start arising. This is in Damascus, Syria, and it's a little farther east and a little bit north of Jerusalem. And here is a plan that will be replicated in many respects around the Islamic world. And again, the dome, and we have these three, they're called minarets, and they are what I was telling you about in the formal analysis, these things that reach to the sky beyond human reach and into the heavens. That's what this is. And again, this is the detail of mosaics in the courtyard arcade. And so you see some trees, you see some buildings. What don't you see?
Iconography and like people.
Yeah, people especially, absolutely. And so that's the thing, that we take the second commandment quite seriously. And you can see they're very well accomplished in visual arts. And so here's a frieze from the south facade of the Umayyad Palace in Jordan. And so again, we see this geometric design, basically making triangles, basically series of opposed diagonal lines. And again, instead of depictions, we see floral patterns. Great mosque in Tunisia. Same pattern, the domes and the minaret being right here. and a minaret in Samarra, Iraq. And this is kind of an interesting thing in that it's a spiraling minaret. And they had talked about this as being kind of maybe inspired by Mesopotamian culture. And there is a part of the Bible that talks about the Tower of Babel. And that too was an architectural feat of the ancient world. It's recorded in the Bible. And smaller scale, a lot of the same characteristics. In this case, the brickwork itself becomes the design. And so they got some bricks inlaid, they have some create holes, they have other things going on. And so this becomes standard for Islamic architecture. And what I really want to get to here is the aerial view of the Great Mosque at Cordoba, Spain, 8th to 10th centuries, rededicated as the Cathedral of St. Mary, 1236. So one of the things about these temples, about these mosques and other holy places, a lot of times they're built right on top of existing temples. And this place here was believed that this site was originally a temple to the god Janus from the Roman pagan religion. And then we have the introduction of Islam, and they built this great, magnificent mosque. It's a World Heritage Site. And then it says here, rededicated as the Cathedral of St. Mary. Well, what happened? It's kind of the reverse of the Hagia Sophia. We see the Hagia Sophia as a cathedral until the Ottomans move in and they turn it into a mosque because Islam is the dominant religion. And so these things go back and forth. And this is the interior, the prayer hall of the Great Mosque in Cordoba, Spain. Archways upon archways. A lot of this is structurally not necessary, but it's decorative. This style here with all of the columns, it's called hypostyle. It's where all of the columns support the archways and the walls and so on. And here's a detail of the facade. And again, just like I've been saying, and we're into this for almost 300 years here, decoration, pattern, exquisite decoration. One of the things that they do with the archway is that they embellish on that. And so we have this kind of archway that's really 3, 4, 5 semicircles. It's different than a Roman archway. They have another kind that we'll see on Wednesday. It's called a horseshoe arch. And this is kind of what a horseshoe arch is, but this is not exactly it. And so I didn't have my film on this one. So I think this will be as far as we go today. So we saw the Great Mosque of Cordoba and the Dome of the Rock. And this is where we'll begin on Wednesday. Any questions before I cut you loose?
Nope.
Nope.
No.
All right. Well, it was nice talking with you guys. Have a good
Good
rest
night.
of the evening.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too. Make it home safe.
Yeah, you bet. See ya.
Bye.